When you think of North and South, what comes to mind?
Well, it was a wonderful experience for me. It was very special because, we did a good part of our filming, and we started filming outside of Charleston, South Carolina, and that was my birthplace. So it was very special that we were filming in my the town where I was born, and it was the first time that my parents saw me on working on set. They came down from Connecticut to watch some of the filming. And so, we did a little bit of sightseeing. We went to my grandparents' grave outside of Charleston, and so yeah, it was a very special experience from that standpoint that my parents actually came on set and for the first time to watch me work as an actor. Yeah, it was a very special experience, and you know, portraying an enslaved person was, um I guess, in a way, it was an honor for me to do that. You know, and I meditated. I did everything that I could to try to inhabit the soul of an enslaved person. When you think about, slavery and what a horrible institution it is that other people have the power of life and death over you. The women would have children, and then they take the children and sell the children. It was just like, this horrible institution. So, for me to portray what, my the situation that my ancestors were in was a very special experience. Trying to figure out if someone is working from dawn to dusk, 6 days a week for no money, right? And they had one day off for Sunday, and so, that was the little bit of time they had to take care of their own personal needs, wash their clothes, and, do those other things. Um, so, I meditated. I did everything I could to try to inhabit the soul of an enslaved person. And, like can you imagine if you're in bondage like that, and how do you live from moment to moment? What things do you have to look forward to? What thoughts go through your mind when you first get up in the morning? What thoughts go through your mind when you lay your head down to rest for the night, and you know that the next day is just more of the same. I did my best to try to um, experience that, and I guess I experienced it as much as someone who could experience it who wasn't actually in that situation. But yeah, yeah, it was a very special experience for me from that standpoint as well. My parents seeing me for the first time and portraying an enslaved person, and um, I decided to create Ezra as a combination of my grandfathers. My mother's father, he had a shooting accident. Apparently, well, the way it was explained to me, he was cleaning his gun and he shot himself in the wrist. So he had just the use of these two fingers, and these fingers were pinned down like that. And so that was one of Ezra's characteristics. You probably didn't notice it, but that was one of Ezra's characteristics, that he just had the use of those three fingers on his right hand. Uh, and I remember when I didn't tell my mother about that, and when she was on the set watching us filming, she she started weeping. She got emotional when she saw that I was using her father as part of my character as Ezra. It was uh, all around, it was a very special experience because it was one of those gigs where I felt like it was meant to be for me, shooting in the town where I was born, and my parents coming for the first time, and the director was British as well. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which I found interesting. Um, but yeah, it was an emotional experience for me because of the subject matter and it's because of how it personally affected me. Um, and whenever you portray historical figures, I think as an actor you feel a special responsibility to try to give, you try to give truth to all of your characters, but especially when you're portraying, historical figures, you want to make it as true as you can, and to deliver, to help to deliver the story with as much integrity as possible. So yeah, I felt very honored to have the opportunity to portray Ezra, and you know, a lot of people don't realize that our stunt coordinator on the show was Joe Dunn. Are you familiar with that?
No, no.
Joe Dunn. Joe Dunn was our stunt coordinator, and he had been Peter Sellers' stunt double in all of the Pink Panther movies. So Joe had the greatest stories. He was amazing. We'd be shooting out all day. We come back home. He'd go up, take a shower, put on a shirt and tie, and we meet down at the bar, and then he'd tell all these great stories. I remember. I don't know if are familiar, how familiar you are with the Pink Panther movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Cato, his assistant, was his instructions were to attack him at any time, right? And so, like as Peter Sellers was asleep, he'd get up to go get a glass of water, and Cato would jump him, right? So anyway, so Joe was telling it the stories. He said, "Well, whenever Cato jumped uh, Peter Sellers, he was jumping me. He was." He said, "So he said I broke every bone in my body. I did." He said he was a mess, but that was his job. So yeah, it was very that I was very honored to be able to spend time with Joe because he was such a great guy, such an engaging human being, a great stunt man and stunt coordinator. Uh, but when I found out that he had been Peter Sellers' stunt double in all those Pink Panther movies, I couldn't get enough of him. I would spend as much time with him because he had all of these great stories about him being beat up and breaking bones in the Pink Panther movies.
Can you remember sort of getting the part of Ezra and how it all sort of came about?
I auditioned 3 or 4 times, and I here in Hollywood, and I my role originally wasn't supposed to be as large as it was, but they once we got on the set and things worked out, they wrote more stuff for me. As a matter of fact, Joe, I remember there was a couple of times Joe said we're writing another scene for you, right? So he was involved in the writing. I don't know how that worked, but the stunt coordinator was involved like that. But yeah, yeah, I auditioned and I was doing. I think I was doing an episode of T.J. Hooker, which was a cop show starring William Shatner from some Star Trek, and so I had auditioned for the miniseries North and South, and while I was doing that show, I had a day off, and I went and auditioned my first audition, and then I got lucky and I booked it, and I was able to give one of probably the only way an actor can give somebody else work is with his stunt double. And so the guy who was doubling me on TJ Hooker was Benny Moore. And I remember asking Benny, I said, Benny, you going to be available to go back east to do this miniseries with me? And he said, yeah, yeah. And then he doubled me really for the rest of my career. Yeah, he was. I would always say, Benny, make me look macho, man. Make me look rugged. He said, I got you, Bo. I got you.
And North and South was a huge production, sort of thousands of extras and costumes, and the biggest names in the business were involved, really. Did it seem like a big deal at the time?
Um, it didn't. It, I I guess in a way it did, and in a way it didn't. It was a great job. They were paying us well. It was an emotional job for me, playing an enslaved person, and my parents involved coming to see me. Uh, but on the day-to-day basis, when you're working, you don't necessarily think that way that this is something epic that we're doing. I mean, at least I don't. It's just like it's doing the work. And as I say, I meditated. I did everything I could to try to live the life of an enslaved person. And so I kind of had my nose at a grindstone, I wasn't really thinking about the big picture. Uh, but at the time it was a big deal. Yeah, it was. I think we had in book two I think there were 6 episodes. And yeah, so it was nice being on TV every night for for 6 nights. And my parents really enjoyed um, telling everybody and sharing their experience when they came on the set watching me work.
And at that point, had you read the books that the series is based on, sort of written by John Jakes, or did you become aware of them as you were filming?
I became aware of them as I was filming. Yeah, and I made a conscious decision not to read the books, um, and I was going to go purely from my point of view of depicting an enslaved person, and with the input of the director.
Hmm.
Mm.
Okay. And you sort of poignantly touched on it at the start, but I guess how did you find sort of playing the character of Ezra? Because obviously North and South is set during a complex time in history, and the audience first sees Ezra as a slave who is sort of eventually given his freedom, and by the end of the series is really sort of a key part of the main's extended family, and sort of the character evolves sort of quite a lot from when we first see him to when we sort of see him sort of at the end of the series.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Ezra was an interesting character to portray. It was funny because Forrest Whitaker was in it, right? And so Forrest and I would joke about like he was the bad slave, I was the good slave. But yeah, I it was Erica Gimpel and in our storyline with Forrest. Um, it was. I mean, it's hard to put into words because those are times, there are people I remember uh, Parker Stevenson did an interview on one of the morning shows, and he was talking about the Civil War period was the most romantic period in our history. And when he said that, I I did a double take, There's nothing romantic about slavery, nothing romantic about, they did this in that, I mean, you imagine having a leg removed with no anesthesia. I mean, it was just such a horrible time in our history. Um, And you think about, I had a bit of a sense when I was a kid. I spent some time in Georgia with my father's family and in South Carolina with my mother's family. And, we didn't have hot and cold running water in the house. We had a pump on the porch, a pump with, cold water, and that's all you had. Um, and an outhouse as a bathroom, and living the way we live now, it's so convenient and hygienic when you think about the way those people lived. And as I say, I got a little taste of it when I would go home as a child. We call it going home as a child to my mo father's home and my mother's home. to see how they lived. I remember when, as a kid, we went home to Charleston, and I was with my cousins, and they had a fish man who would come uh, with a cart, and he would sell his fish in the neighborhood. And see, he'd sing a song. He'd say, it was like, "Fish man, come and bring your dish pane. We got shrimp now, we got crab now. Come on down, y'all. I'll make you a good deal. I'll make you a good deal." And and when he was coming, you could hear him. He had this big voice. You could hear him, and the cats would all be they're smelling the fish, right? But uh, but I remember my cousins, and I was visiting from Connecticut, so I remember my cousins saying, "Mama, Mama, do we have to have shrimp and crab again? Can't we have hot dogs?" You know. uh, but yeah, that experience called to mind a lot of my experiences as a child when I would go there. Uh, and living so much of your life outside. There were 15 children in my mother's family, and 11 in my father's family. So in the South, they had a lot of children back in those days. Um, and the land, the smells were different when I would go home to visit, with the animals. Um, because I lived in the suburbs in Connecticut, but and then we were out in the country when I would go to South Carolina and to Georgia. Uh, but my little bit of experience visiting there when I was a child, I think to help me in forming my experience as Ezra. When he was, I don't know if you remember when he was building the water wheel and just being outside. It was one of those experiences that I remember recalling to myself that this just had to be. This was meant to be. Me doing this show was meant to be.
And the cast of North and South was incredible. I don't know if it's sort of ever been replicated, and it was sort of led by Patrick Swayze, but sort of you had memorable scenes with Erica Gimple, Forrest Whitaker, and Gene Simmons. Sort of, I guess, who stands out to you, and sort of who did you enjoy working with?
Oh, I enjoyed working with everybody. When I worked with Forrest and Erica, we'd always do a prayer. We'd say a prayer before our scenes. I enjoyed working with Gene Simmons, and I was always a fan of old Hollywood. She was in Spartacus, and she was a gorgeous woman when she was young, and so it was nice to have an opportunity to spend time with her. I've been lucky in my career. I did a play with Charlton Heston, so I spent time with him. I spent time with Desi Arnaz, and for My Love Lucy, I spent time with Lucy. I was doing a show when I was doing a play with Charlton Heston. Lucy came backstage. Uh, so uh, when I had the opportunity to spend time with Gene Simmons, it was very special. And I was asking her about her experience of working with Kirk Douglas doing Spartacus, and it was just I was living my dream. I was living my dream. Working with Forrest and Gene and Erica and Parker and Kirstie Alley. I mean, everyone was very cool and very special. And Patrick, we call it Buddy. Buddy was his nickname. We call him Buddy Swayze. Unfortunately, he lost his life as a young man. Um, but yeah, it was kind of a family affair. I felt, and so. It was one of those roles when people ask me one of my favorite roles. Ezra is one of them. I did a show on Nickelodeon called Just Jordan. It was a sitcom, and uh, and I had the opportunity to work with my granddaughter and my daughter. And so those are my two favorite experiences, North and South. and Just Jordan on Nickelodeon.
And you kind of touched on it there and said it was a family affair, but I guess kind of what was it like on set? Because you had this real blend of sort of Hollywood legends and up and coming stars as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have to say that some, when you're about to shoot, they have what they call last looks. So hair and makeup come and give you a last look to make sure everything's all right. And Forrest and I were slightly neglected, so we were giving each other last looks. And I did this one scene where I was it was a kind of a funeral scene in one of the slave quarters because we filmed in actual slave quarters, and uh, the 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 when when we first walked in to the slave quarters, you could just feel the heaviness, feel the anguish of the souls that had gone before us. And I remember I was doing this scene, and it was very emotional, and I feel I did a great take. And then at the end of the take, the first ADs and the director said, "Wait, there's some." I did the whole scene with there was some lint or something on my face, and so hair and makeup. Well, actually, that was makeup. Makeup got a little chastising because they didn't, didn't do their job right, and giving last looks. They were paying a great attention to Jeannie Francis's bosoms and all of that. So, as I said, Forrest and I were doing our own last looks, but it was a shame that we had it was such a great take, and uh, I had some stuff on my face, so I had to do the take over again. I mean, it all worked out. It all worked out fine. But riding the buckboards with the horse and buggies reminded me of my childhood with my grandfathers. Uh, uh, and I remember the first time I got up on the buckboard, uh, it was like I had these pangs of nostalgia, thinking about my grandfathers. And to this day, I love the smell of manure. But, because my grandfathers, they both were always working out with the animals, and uh, and so my father used to joke on Sundays we would take a drive out in the country after church, and there would be these dairy farms, and so my father would say, "Well, Bo, your smell's coming up. It'd be cow manure and horse manure's coming." But they would remind me of my grandfathers, so to this day, I still love them. So, and I think country folks, I mean, that's their life, right? And so the smell of manure is just used grass. That's all it is anyway. But yeah, it always reminded me of my grandfathers. And of course, I had wonderful memories of when I was going down to Georgia and South Carolina and visiting with my relatives down there.
And are you still in touch with sort of any of the cast from the series, or is it a case of that everyone sort of goes off and does their different projects and everyone kind of loses touch?
Yeah, I kind of lost touch with folks. I'm in touch with Erica um, Gimbel through social media, and I kind of lost touch with Forrest. And of course, Gene Simmons, she passed. Um, and I was in touch with Terry Garber for a while. Um, but yeah, there's some projects uh, you continue on as friends, and some you kind of go your separate ways. And a project like North and South is so big, and there's so many actors that a lot of time you don't have the closeness that you would have, like if you've done something where there are four of you on a series or something where you're close. Like with, I don't know if you're familiar with Cowboy Bebop, but I there's the cast. We did that show in '98, and so the cast, we have this open-ended text conversation. So we're constantly in touch with each other. But it's easier to do that when there's a small number of people. But North and South, there were so many people, and remember Liz Taylor was in it. I mean, this just a lot of people. And we started off in Charleston and or outside of Charleston and Boone Hall, and then we moved to Mississippi and Louisiana where we were shooting. And there was some shooting in on Arkansas as well as I recall. Uh, but yeah, it was a fantastic experience, and I still have warm memories, when I think of my experiences doing the show and the good times we had.
And I guess sort of how aware were you of the audience response to the series? Because there were obviously sort of fewer television channels when it first aired, and it was obviously a huge event. And book two sort of followed on from book one just a few months after sort of that came out, and obviously it was sort of immensely popular as well.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, we got a lot of play. We got a lot of play. It was in the media a lot, and it was kind of a big deal. And my parents really enjoyed it because in my little town, I was kind of the celebrity from my little town in Connecticut, and they would announce at church that I'm going to be on TV and all of that. Um, but yeah, it had nice buzz. North and South had nice buzz, and of course, whenever you're doing a Civil War epic, there's going to be, I guess, a certain amount of I don't know what you would call it, but maybe questionable comments about the subject matter or whatever that is. But there wasn't much of that. But we were walking in the bright light there for quite a while because it was such a well done project and apparently very successful.
And obviously you've mentioned it was sort of a very personal role for you, but I suppose sort of what impact did North and South have on you and your career, I suppose?
Oh yeah, it had a great effect. I remember Bob Papazian, one of the producers, he called me in and and Forrest he called Forrest and I in together. He wanted to chat with us, and he said, "Now you neither of you will ever have to worry about work again in Hollywood, right?" And he was half right. Forrest never had to worry about work. But yeah, it was being part. It was a nice credit to have on your resume. So, if you have strong credits on your resume, it helps you get in on other projects, and so that was a nice boost to my career.
Hmm. And I know you sort of you've done everything really, film, television, theatre, voiceover work. Do people still associate you with North and South and ask you about it, or is it other pieces of work that people most want to sort of name drop when they meet you?
Well, there are other pieces. Let's see, Halloween, H2O. But yeah. Well, I mean, I'm trying to think North and South. That was a long time ago. So a lot of people, and of course, I think very few of us look like we looked many years ago. So, but I know that at least for a while, they were airing the sh North and South once a year around Christmas time.
Hmm.
And so one of the atmosphere people had told me about that had worked on the show. And but yeah, it's kind of in the history books, so to speak, now.
Hmm. And sort of North and South books one and two were filmed and released back to back, sort of dealing with the lead up to the Civil War and the Civil War itself. And then sort of the best part of a decade later, a third installment was sort of released dealing with the Reconstruction period.
Mhm.
Was there any sort of approach made to get you back for book three, or did that sort of not happen?
I, I never, no one ever reached out to me about that. There were rumors, I heard rumors, but uh, but no one actually ever reached out to about the book three. I
Hmm.
would have loved to done it. It was such a wonderful project to be part of, and the people were great, and it was a very positive experience. I mean, despite the subject matter, it was a great gig, a great acting gig, and it was meaningful. Was to me beyond just being a job,
Mm.
and so it was very satisfying to because I was piecing Ezra together as being like a little bit of my grandfather's here and there, and maybe my father and one of my uncles, and with their mannerisms and their speech patterns and the fingers. Um, it was it was very rewarding to as the project turned out. I felt good that I did a pretty credible job and helping to tell the story.
Oh, absolutely. And I think finally for me, sort of this year is the 40th anniversary of North and South since it first premiered. I guess sort of what do you think is the legacy of the series and how do you reflect on it sort of 40 years later? Because I think the people that first watched it are still watching it and also sort of new generations are finding it as well.
Mm. Um, well, it's a piece from a time long ago, and it has nostalgic value for me, obviously, and as for a lot of people as well. As a matter of fact, they put together a little, uh, actually a VHS of my work for me. I think it's about 45 minutes of a compilation of my work in North and South. And so my granddaughter just mentioned last week that she wanted to see it. So we're going to have to convert it from VHS to put it on a disc. And so I'm looking forward to seeing it, and of course it'll bring back more memories that I kind of probably lost. I haven't thought about, but once I see it, I get the pangs of nostalgia that it was epic. It was epic. And as I think back in my career, um, I think that's probably. I think that's probably the only time that I recall that I actually portrayed uh, a person, a historical figure. Even though, I mean, Ezra was fictional, but he represented historical people who were enslaved and lived that life. When I go to conventions and sign autographs, I mention that to people when it's appropriate that say, well, imagine yourself being an enslaved person. Imagine yourself being an enslaved person and somebody else having the power of life and death over you and telling you when you eat, when you don't eat, just total control of your life. And just in terms of expanding your human experience to understand someone else's plight. And I've had some interesting responses because under normal circumstances, nobody's going to do that, right? I had to do it because I was an actor, and but now and then when I mention this, people say, "Oh, I never thought." Ooh, ooh, this is eye-opening. This is eye-opening. But anyway, I'm going on and on.